We can't gather in person this year, but we've adapted. The 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival brings the best in film from across the globe and around the corner. And this year, it's all virtual, so the films and events are coming directly to you. Join us for the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival, October 15th through the 29th. More information is at mkefilm.org/MFF.
Good evening, and welcome to Day 14 of the 2020 Milwaukee Film Festival, presented by Associated Bank. And that's the point where you applaud. Thank you. I'm Dante McFadden. I'm the programmer for Black Lens, and this is the Nightcap, presented by the Yabuki Family Foundation. First, don't forget to cast your vote for the Alan H. Budd and Suzanne L. Selick Audience Award. To do that, visit the film or shorts program page at watch.mkefilm.org. You log in with your pass or your ticket code, and you click the button that says Vote Now, and you'll be connected to the form that serves as your ballot. And at any point, whatever you do, don't tear your computer screen. Now that we got that squared away, you've seen that we have a double up challenge happening. And thanks to the generosity of Judith McGregor and Richard Galloon, if we raise $75,000 during the festival, they will double it. Text double up, DOUBLEUP, to 44321, or go to mkefilm.org/donate to donate, or go to mkefilm.org members to become a member and help us meet our goal. And Milwaukee Film couldn't do what we do during the festival as well as throughout the year without our members. Members get access to free films throughout the year, discounts on tickets, passes, and more. Plus, our members keep the nonprofit Milwaukee Film going. And given what 2020 has brought us, your support means even that much more to us. And if you think all of that sounds appealing, please join us. And if you're already a member, thank you so much and help spread the word. This evening, we are joined by the filmmakers behind Huntsville Station, The Last Out, I'll End Up in Jail, and Storybook Ending. Wherever you're watching us live, drop your questions and comments in the chat or the comments section, and we'll pull them into our conversation. So to begin our first conversation, I would like to welcome the artistic director of Milwaukee Film, Dr. Kara Ochburn, to kick us off.
Thank you, Dr. McFadden. I have to pass off our doctor to doctor handoff one more time this festival. And I would like to welcome one of the co-directors of Huntsville Station, Chris Filippone, to the screen. This is Robbie. He's a cat. He didn't make any films, and he probably doesn't want to be on screen, but he's on my lap in case anybody needs him. If you have any cat-related questions, he's here. So welcome to Virtual Milwaukee, Chris. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Oakland, California.
Oakland, California. All right. Still daylight out there.
It is. Yeah.
So the strangeness of these Q&As. So Huntsville Station is a documentary that kind of takes us to a bus station just outside of a prison in Huntsville, Texas. And I'm interested in hearing first, kind of how did you and your co-director, Jamie Meltzer, come across this place, this subject, this story? Kind of where did this all start for you two?
Sure. So I was in graduate school at the Stanford Documentary Film Program, and Jamie was a professor of mine, and I had been researching film ideas, and I make films around topics around freedom, catharsis, different ideas in that kind of orbit, and was interested in looking at sort of topics around reentry and from prison. And I had come across, it was like a photo essay on this bus station in Texas, which is adjacent to a prison. And it's the prison is the largest release center in all the state of Texas, and where basically almost all the inmates in the state get released from. And I was intrigued and had mentioned it to Jamie, my co-director, and he had actually been to the station before because he had made a previous film called True Conviction, which followed the story of a kind of informal detective agency of men who had been falsely convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. And so he had been there at the prison when one man was released in the film. And so he had seen it and seen the bus station itself and the sort of surreal and interesting and sort of charged moment that it was. And we kind of decided in our talking that, you know, maybe we could just go down there and make a film. And that's what we did. So yeah.
And it's a wonderful film. In fact, congrats today on your IDA Doc Awards shortlist note. I was like reading, I'm like, ooh, I get to talk about that film later today.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. It was a surprise to me because I woke up and somebody had posted about a different film in there, and I was just scrubbing through the list. Like, oh wait, I didn't get an email. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a good way to find out. Can you talk a little bit about the process of co-directing and like specifically what is it like to co-direct a film with somebody who's been your teacher and your mentor, and like how does that sort of like re-equalizing kind of work? How do you share the roles? I'm imagining very small crew.
Very small. So yeah, I mean, it was a little strange in that, you know, he had been my professor and, but it was right after graduate school and we were like, should we just go make this thing? Cause I kind of proposed the idea and he was like, yeah, let's go. Like, let's just go do it and see what happens. So it was very much interestingly, like, the dynamic between professor and student sort of dissolved, and we really sort of went into it with a level of openness. And part of that was, I think, due to the fact that the only research we could really do was just in like a few articles and things like that. And we didn't know who was being released. We couldn't get in contact with them. So we really just had to show up and, you know, kind of organically make the film in the process of doing it. So, but collaborating, was really good in a lot of ways because Jamie is he's more big picture and can see sort of the forest, and I'm really much more detail oriented. And so there's tension sometimes, but there's a good back and forth there where we can sort of make progress and keep things detailed, but also keep things moving. So yeah.
So I mean, this is going to be a hard or an easy question. I can't tell yet. But you sort of went in not entirely knowing that you had found sort of a captivating space, a set in some right, a space that you wanted to sort of capture, and knowing some of the dynamics that you were going to potentially be able to capture on screen. In the filming, being there, or in the editing, I'm interested in hearing about moments that were surprising for you. You know, going in with some expectations about, you know, or not. Tell me more.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good question because, you know, there was a part of going and making the film that, you know, we didn't know if people were going to be receptive at all. And so that was the first major hurdle. But what we sort of found after folks were released and we would talk to them, we would just say, hey, we're here documenting the experience. You know, we've done different films around, I mean, Jamie in particular, around, you know, inmate life and post prison life. And so the interesting thing that we found is more often than not, people really open to being filmed. And I think part of it was that in a way, I think it's twofold, and I think they're actually a little bit contradictory. So maybe it depended on the person, but what was interesting really was the experience was so much bigger, I think, for a lot of the men who are released, that really we were a lot smaller part of their experience. And so, they didn't really care. They were like, sure, you can film whatever. And then they just go on the phone and they're just there's a lot going on, I think, in all their minds. And you get that in little moments throughout the film as well. Simultaneously though, the camera, and it was Jamie and I, and we had one production assistant on our shoots. Jamie and I also found that the camera almost offered a little bit of a space in which, you know, these parolees could reflect for a moment, because they really, you know, and also be vulnerable, I think, because in prison, it's not, you're not able to express vulnerability and emotion like that outwardly. And so really to be able to give that space in that moment for those things to happen, it was really powerful just to be there in the presence of it, especially that first, catharsis, a release of emotion that a lot of folks felt. It wasn't easy to get those moments, but we shot the film over the course of, I believe, 8 or 9 days, and had to kind of piece it together to sort of get the experience because, folks would be released and sometimes they would be at the station for as little as 20 minutes or 2 or 3 hours. And it just varied day by day with whatever the bus schedule was.
Right.
So we had to kind of find our way through that process as well. Some days we'd show up and, we'd get a moment and then they'd be gone and be like, wow, okay, that was our shoot day. So I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a little bit of like kind of the behind the scenes and sort of, thinking really about I think also they're kind of anonymous, but I think you're also probably like, you're bearing witness to them in a way that they haven't been seen in years. And that being like, I don't know, sort of this freshness to their new self, but while also being kind of like, I'm just one of these guys. There's nothing, there's no names. Spoilers if you haven't seen the film. If you haven't seen the film, make sure you watch the film. But there's not names. There's not like information about. Sometimes there's where they're going, at least first. There's really not a lot of identifying information. So it's really sort of a collective experience. So I imagine that would make people slightly more willing to be, I don't know, but also it's like they're in like this, they're totally in this other moment. Some of them are just like, yeah, sure, whatever. I need to like spend some of this money, contact these people, get on that bus. A poignant moment though, with like, is one of the buses is going to be quite a while. He was like 6 hours. And he's like, but what 6 hours? I've been, I've been sitting around waiting for, however many, it was 30 years. It was a huge number of years. And so this exploration of time, is that something that you thought about in sort of in the editing process of like, how are we thinking about time? You don't know when you're watching it that it's 8 separate days. It feels like it's one.
Exactly.
But, sort of thinking about that, the value of time or the non-value of time, was that a consideration in your edit?
It was definitely, a reflection, I would say, within the process of editing. I mean, we knew the first shot that you see with the parolees exiting prison, we definitely were inspired a lot, interestingly, by a lot of those kind of Lumiere takes and workers leaving the factory and just spending time within one single shot, and having, as a viewer, having to just bear witness to this process in some ways and having that sort of theme of time, while sort of subtle in a shot like that, to just kind of keep that in the overall aesthetic a little bit. And sort of later in the film, when the film sort of quiets down, we really wanted to capture those moments where people are just sitting alone and sitting with themselves within the space of time and reflecting and kind of feeling and seeing as best we could to sort of capture that experience and the subtleties of it. And so, time was absolutely a part of the process. And it was a challenge in the edit too, because we found in the process of making the film that after the first bus comes and leaves, that there's some people who are left over, some people are waiting for another bus, but everything kind of quiets down. And we realized, let's incorporate that into the character of the film. And interestingly, it kind of allowed for, as a viewer, someone to kind of experience time, to finally like reflect, there's this onslaught of the experience, and then it kind of, things sort of slow down. And ultimately, we want the viewers to be able to, experience alongside with these men, but also hopefully to have some sense of empathy through the process of watching the film, and to kind of cross the boundaries in some way of the film. Yeah,
I think you're very successful at that. There's some just basic human things that are happening in these early moments that are, even as someone who hasn't had a lot of the kinds of this specific experience, but like I could find sort of a relatability to like the urgency of certain things that are not that are creature comforts, and then the sort of contemplative moment. So congratulations on capturing that and giving us that space for that empathetic kind of connection with somebody else.
Thank you.
Have you had the chance, maybe specifically given sort of the nature of the production, have you had the chance to share this film either with the specific folks that you capture or with their peers, and how has their reaction been, as well as kind of other audiences? Are there anything sort of, I'm hoping that you've been able to share it with either some of the men who you document or their peers, but tell me if that is not yet happened.
That has actually not yet happened, partially because a lot of them were going to halfway houses where they were only going to be for a period of time. They didn't have phone numbers coming out of prison, so it's been hard to reach, or email addresses. So the only, I think, thing we would have to do, we've been talking about figuring this out, and it's weird too, because we made this film, and it's funny going through the editing process. You feel like you know someone when you've seen them so many times. And in the process of making it, we may have only spent like 5 minutes with someone before like jumping to the next moment or something like that. So it's certainly been a challenge. But we've been like, should we write letters to like the addresses that they wrote on the release forms and whatnot? Like how to can we get in touch with a lot of these guys? It's actually been something we're sort of in the process of figuring out. So
or if the DOC could be of any help. But I also wonder if if the film could be, used like as like a preparatory tool for like, this is what you're about to experience. I think it could be really, I don't know, sort of, I'm just giving you new outreach ideas. Just
that's an amazing idea. I like that a lot.
I'm like, this would be useful to like, because they're so, it's overwhelming. You can tell that they're overwhelmed, and like they know, okay, we're gonna walk down the street and we're gonna go to the station, and we have these. And it's a straightforward process, but there's so much emotion behind it that it might be a useful reflection piece.
Absolutely, that's a great idea.
Let us know if these things happen. How has the audience reaction been, sort of from not recently released from incarceration folks, but sort of general audiences? Have you found anything unexpected in releasing it and sharing it with the world?
Well, I think not that I would be surprised that people really like the film and find that there's something special about it, but every time I work on a documentary or do something, every time we come out with a film and it's finished and it works for people, it feels like a miracle. So for me, like it's been a great experience, and hearing that, people are able to really just feel that sense of empathy on a very deep level, almost ineffable level, to me has just been like the highest compliment in some ways, because it's really what we're after, especially with doing this kind of work. And it's really about sort of crossing boundaries in some ways. And I think, there's a lot of ways we could have approached this, interviewing people and sitting them down and doing that. But we really wanted to kind of put you within the experience in a lot of ways. And so for people to really engage with it, and to come out of the experience, having felt something, and people having expressed that to me, is really like the highest compliment in some ways. Because I don't know that watching this film that you're going to learn something, but we want you to feel something. And that's really ultimately the goal with this piece, I think.
Well, you learn something about the economics of how much 2 squirts versus 4 squirts of perfume apparently is worth.
That's true.
I mean, like there's definitely things to learn you didn't know you needed to learn, but that are there for you to learn. What's next? What are you working on now? What's next for the film, other than being up for awards and things like that?
So we have some festivals and things like that going on through the fall, obviously with Milwaukee, and then next month there's Doc NYC and a bunch of others, which is really exciting. We hope to release this version of the film through like Short of the Week. We've been in touch with them, so that's something we hope to do. And then I guess make another film. So I've been editing my partner. We shot a film about these mothers from Central America who travel through Mexico every year, searching for their kids who migrated north towards the U.S., but they went missing somewhere in Mexico. And so they go town to town. searching basically and showing their pictures and whatnot. So we went on that bus trip. I guess it was over a year ago, and we're finishing up the film now. So we're working on that. And then honestly, I think I might take a break for like a month or two and just read and rest my mind before thinking about working on a first feature, which I would like to start hopefully in the spring, but quarantine, we'll see what happens.
Right. Yeah. Wonderful. You've got a comment over here saying that Angela definitely felt something and compliments you on a powerful short.
Wow. Thank you so much.
There it is on screen for you to read. So thank you so much, Chris. Please pass that along to Jamie, who couldn't join us this evening. Those of you who haven't yet had the chance, make sure you watch Huntsville Station, which is in, I didn't write down which shorts program it's in. I am assuming it's in Stranger Than Fiction, because that is our documentary shorts program. I'm just going to say that's where it is. You can look it up. Those of you who are in front of the grid and searching, or the guide and searching for it. So thank you so much, Chris.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara. I appreciate it.
And I'm going to welcome to join me on screen next, the director of The Last Out, Michael Gassert. Hi there.
Hi, Kara. Thanks so much.
Welcome back to Wisconsin.
It's good to be here. I try to create a little Wisconsin love for myself here in Brooklyn, but it's good to be back.
Yeah. So The Last Out, tell us sort of what the origins of that project were for you and your directing team.
Sure. Well, for me, as a native of Wisconsin, my curiosity for life and appreciation for sports definitely began there. But as we get older, my partner, Sammy Khan, my co-director, and my producer, John Miller, we talk often about, the cost of things, like what it costs to just even get this glass of water here. Or I think as filmmakers, we have a different understanding of the cost to create content and all of the things that we consume all the time. And, as curious individuals and lovers of sport, we sort of turned our lens to baseball, and specifically the situation with Cuban baseball and Cuban baseball players, and the tremendous risk that they have to take in order to pursue their dreams and to achieve, the top level of their craft. And just by way of this crazy political situation that we have in the U.S. with Cuba and this ridiculous trade embargo, there's some crazy and dark and illegal things that just normal everyday people, whether you're a sports person or an immigrant, have to participate in just to try to make their lives better. So we wanted to sort of pull the curtain back and reveal the human side of one of these sports that we love so much.
Yeah. And so where do you start with that kind of a project? I'm specifically sort of wondering, like, whether you started with Gus or whether you started with your sort of three characters or a third thing that I haven't imagined.
Definitely. The true origins of this story with my partner Sammy came when he was working on another project and sort of beating his head against the wall and would sort of calm himself down by checking out baseball scores and spin rates and things like this. And I think his wife and some of his colleagues encouraged him to, look deeper into some of these stories. But Sammy had done quite a bit of research and contacted Gus Dominguez, the agent in our story. So he was really the way in for us. Yeah. And we're able to touch a little bit on Gus's history. I mean, he was one of these guys who, Michael Lewis, who, is credited, did tremendous work with the Oakland A's and, engineered the World Series championship in Boston. But he said of Gus Dominguez that he invented the Cuban market in the 90s when a lot of these players were defecting. But Gus, went to jail in the early 2000s for sending money to somebody in Cuba. And he didn't think he was doing anything wrong, although he was violating the trade embargo. And when we met Gus years later, about 10 years later, we thought, hey, look at this guy. He's putting his life back together. Perhaps he was wrongfully accused. And he keyed us in to these new prospects that he was training in Costa Rica and invited us to come down to meet them. And we're like, hell yeah, we're there. So we went down to Costa Rica, and you can see in the film, the first showcase, these guys are bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, they're full of hope, and there's a lot of promise at that time. There was a wave of defections, and players like Yasiel Puig and Johan Moncada and these big stars in the MLB are defecting and getting signed to go into the minors for $30-60 million. So there was a lot of hope at that time. But afterwards, when we got a little bit closer to the guys and we're having a little party with them, I remember turning to Sammy and saying, I think this is our story here with these players. And we followed them wherever it took us.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the production? You're sort of across different nations. You're maybe sitting alongside something that isn't strictly by the book. Can you talk a little bit about like what that looks like and the sort of the trust that you were able to build with these subjects?
Sure, absolutely. Sammy, John, and I, we kind of came up together in New York working on each other's projects, and we come from a filmmaking background, but it's exciting to get a really small group together, even just the three of us on some of these shoots, and really try to create and capture something bigger than what you might be able to do with a larger crew. But some of these first trips, the three of us went down and we're exploring these stories, but it really took one of us, who ended up really being me most of the time, going down, embedding myself with Happy, Carlos, and Victor Baró, many times, like living with them in the apartments they were staying in Costa Rica. There's a shot in the film where you see these air mattresses on the floor, and there's gloves and socks drying on the chairs, and I had the camera there, so that was my tool that I kept next to me. And at a certain point, I just sort of blended into the woodwork. But there were certain things along the way as the story unfolds, and these guys are waiting for news from Gus, the agent, that there's offers for them to sign, and we're waiting for something to happen as well. But obviously things don't always go according to plan, and we ended up going with Happy across Central America and visiting the guys' families in Cuba, and coming back with footage from their hometown, from their house, and be like, hey, I met your mom, I slept in your bedroom, so these types of things really help like build that trust and intimacy that hopefully is reflected in the film.
Yeah. The bulk of your career in film has been kind of on the sound side of things. I'm interested in like this transition over to kind of the directing, and like anything that sort of stands out for you as like a big win in learning, or is this just like you've secretly been like honing all these skills?
Well, I don't know.
Everybody else's films sound amazing.
Sure. Well, I definitely draw from all of my experiences, and there's definitely certain ones in particular that I can point to that definitely inform how I've approached The Last Out. And one of those that I can point to is just the work I did over many years with a traditional music group called the Master Musicians of Tijuca from Morocco, who have a really interesting history. My relationship with them began as part of a documentary film project made by Augusta Palmer, but I became close with them, and started a record label together and touring and all the time, and it was really a relationship based experience with those musicians, with Bashir, the leader, and similar to other documentary films and music ventures that I've had in Nicaragua and other parts of Latin America. But also in the documentary film world, there's a producer, a friend of mine who I sort of look up to as a mentor, Isaac Selatorov, who's produced a number of really compelling series, most recently the one on Meek Mills. But we worked on a series called Casualties of the Gridiron, which actually I was so proud that it brought me home to Wisconsin and filming up at Lambeau Field with Jerry Kramer and the late Fuzzy Thurston. But we were exploring the human stories behind CTE and head trauma in some of these athletes, in their 40s and 50s. And, I really drew from Isaac and our collective experience of just really understanding and getting close to your subjects and trying to live their experience with them, I think is important in order to tell an honest story.
Yeah. I think there's something I'm going to underline or re-say something you said, because I think it's really important that, like, in documentary in particular, I think, like, it's not necessarily about, like, oh, well, I have the best camera, or I have, this degree or that degree, or this training or that training, but really those relationships that you build with the humans, and, allowing them to tell their story in, like, an honest and fresh way is the secret sauce. Like, you can sort of tell when you watch these. Programmers of documentaries can kind of tell. It's like, oh, they dropped in and they had a nice camera, great. Or, oh, this is like the closest to the truth as you can get when a camera is also present.
Exactly.
So
and I think we really lucked out with Happy and Carlos and Baro, and Happy in particular. I think you can get the sense in the film, and just from the beginning, just had a deep understanding of what we were there for, even before we did, I think. And it was really just to get to their truth, not the glitz and glamour of potentially becoming, a famous rich ball player, but really who they are. And it was an evolution for all of the guys and for us as well. But yeah, we lucked out. And with how generous they were with sharing their stories, and they've joined us for some of these Q&As, and it's just satisfying to hear from them that, hey, this is the truth of what happened to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sort of, I think for baseball fans, I can't count myself among them. I think the world and the process and the sort of, I don't know, the successes and the lack of successes of, like, international scouting and development, and even just, like, I mean, Barro's in the Dominican Winter League at the end, and, like, you sort of know that exists, but there's, like, the deep knowledge of what's going on there is sort of super, like, unknown. Your film kind of peels back that. How has that, landed with audiences? And what has that reception felt like?
Yeah, I don't think you need to be a sports fan to understand and appreciate the risks that these guys take in order to pursue their dreams. But as sports fans, I think we admittedly, and myself included, we view sports and athletes sort of with a sense of entitlement, and talk about their value and their pedigree, and they get reduced to these products. And I have a distinct memory growing up in the Milwaukee area and going to see Hoop Dreams with my dad at the Orpheum Theater. And we were going to Marquette basketball games and Brewer games before I can even remember. But I remember for the first time understanding to some degree, even though South Chicago, the story of William Gates and Arthur Agee in South Chicago is very different than my experience growing up in Mequon. But watching that film and being a Marquette basketball fan, I could understand for the first time how these young men, these young kids, were being groomed into these products,
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to, how people see, Happy and Baro and Carlos, and, we wanted to try to show sort of this uncomfortable feeling, in a sense, this even sort of recollection of the legacy of slavery in sports, and this sort of auction, these bodies, this demand for these particular immigrants, and, just talking about their value. But when you pull everything away, it's like, here are three guys who have hopes and dreams like anybody else, and who are going to take agency of their situation and not just be, have their lives dictated to them. So hopefully that's resonating with people. I think it is, just in the sense that, our primary audience isn't necessarily sports people. Right. It's, people who are interested in the bigger picture, human interest. And, I think what sports really does beyond entertain us is really a lens into our humanity, and not just those of athletes, but us, how do we respond when the Bucks refuse to take the court, to protest social justice? Are we, do we come at it with a sense of entitlement that, hey, why isn't my team performing for me? Or do we take a step back and look deeper at these human beings and what they're trying to express to us?
Yeah. And I think the many human beings who don't even make it to that, to the court or to the field,
Exactly.
but that have been, it's like maybe more extreme than I want, but like sort of used by the machine.
Oh, completely. Exactly. I mean, we talk about it in those terms.
Yeah.
We talk about it in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, behind every success story, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of young men and women who don't make it, whose talents have been used to help groom other players, or who have risked just as much, and still have to make their lives and pursue their dreams in another way, perhaps.
Yeah, it's definitely all sort of in there. So those of you who may not yet have watched The Last Out because you're like, ooh, sports, there's more there. And if you're like, oh, I didn't watch that, but I do love sports, like if you're a baseball fan, you should know about what's happening before they get to the big show. I feel like should be required viewing. Do you have any updates on your subjects, and specifically, how are they grappling with the pandemic? How is this affecting their lives now?
Sure. Yeah. As you see in the film, both Happy and Carlos were able to get to the U.S. In 2017 before we ended this policy of instant asylum for Cuban immigrants, which was one of the last moves that President Obama made, I think, to help warm relations with the Cuban government. However, for Cuban immigrants, it didn't really help them. But fortunately, they were able to get here, and they have their green cards and are on a path to citizenship if they choose. Happy is in Houston. He's working as a personal trainer. He's tuned in a few times for us with these Q&As, sometimes from the gym, pumping iron. As you can see, he kind of bulks up a little bit throughout the film. And Carlos is a father to a brand new baby in Miami with his wife. And he had been working construction for a while, but I think after the pandemic, he has shifted over to driving for Uber and Lyft. Barro is still down there in the Dominican Republic, and I think it's been really difficult for him, as you can imagine. Dominican Republic, like these small island countries, they're able to lock down to some degree, but in terms of the resources, especially for those looking for work and folks like Barro, who have sort of a tenuous papers situation, are usually the last to receive offers for work. So he's had some ups and downs as we sort of leave his story in the film. He's pitching with one of the Dominican teams there, but he had some injuries and had to rehab for a little bit and was dropped by the academy. But he's also had some offers to play abroad in Mexico and Venezuela, and he's just trying to get his papers together because similar to in Dominican Republic, similar to Costa Rica, he had to go to Costa Rica illegally in order to get the legal refugee status, which Major League Baseball required in order for them to be free agents. So it's like these crazy hoops that these folks have to jump through just to follow their dream.
Yeah. So what's next for the film? If people don't have, if people are, of course, are going to watch it at the Milwaukee Film Festival today or tomorrow. But after that, what's happening with the film, and what other projects are you working on? Anything we can keep an eye out for?
Sure, no doubt. Well, I have to give a big shout out to all my friends and family that have tuned in and watched the film and other great films through Milwaukee Film Festival. So thanks so much for programming it. We've had a really busy fall with all of these virtual festivals, Heartland, Hot Springs, Virginia, several that are going on now, and transitioning into the winter, where we'll be participating in Doc NYC next month. We'll have our European premiere at Warclaw in Poland I think we're playing a festival in China, and we're making a big push with our agents to sell the film. So look out for us at Doc NYC. In terms of my next work, obviously, there's still a lot of work to do to get this one out the door, but I'm starting another nonfiction project in the Dominican Republic, a verite-driven observational documentary about a Dominican metalhead / classical guitarist who has started a street school of music for underprivileged kids in the DR while he's battling cancer and a history of trauma and the pandemic, all kinds of things. But it's really a story about access to art and music education, and the wealth gap, and also the internal I think story that we all have to sort of face our own demons. So trying to get down there and get back to work. But,
we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. That sounds really compelling, and we'll keep our eyes open for it. I like how the first 2 Q&As this evening are like, here's your Doc NYC preview, everybody. This is what we got. So thank you, Michael, for your film, for your time this evening, and please pass our appreciation on to the rest of your team.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass the mic over to the metaphysical mic over to Dr. Dante McFadden again.
Let's try this again. Thank you, Dr. Ackburn. So if we could bring our guest on the screen, please. Excellent. So let's begin this conversation by having each of you introduce who you are, your film, and what else you would like our audience tuning in to know about you.
Who would you like to go first?
Go ahead, man.
Okay. So my name is Lanre Olabisi. My film is a storybook ending. And what else did you want to know?
Anything you want the audience to know.
Have they already watched the film?
I believe those who are tuning in may have.
Yes. Okay, just wanted to make sure. So the idea, like where the idea came from, if they're wondering about that, it all stemmed from an altercation that James Blake, who is a black tennis star, he had in New York back in 2015. And he was actually waiting for a cab to take him to the US Open when all of a sudden and out of nowhere, he was thrown to the ground by a police officer. And one of the things when I was watching that surprised me was the fact that he didn't fight back. And one of the things that I forgot to mention was the fact that it was an undercover police officer and he never announced himself and he said, "Hey, this is the police." And it ended up being a case of mistaken identity. James Blake didn't do anything. He just happened to fit the description. And so when I watched that, one of the things that kind of scared me was, okay, if I ever got in that situation, I'm fighting back. And so what would happen if I fought back? What would happen if I threw the cop? What would happen if I started making all the wrong decisions? And that's really where the story spawned from. And it's actually based on a feature script that I had written. And then the short was kind of like a proof of concept sort of thing.
Thanks. And for those for you who are unfamiliar, James Blake is the former professional tennis player, and he was tackled down by a New York City police officer in the case of mistaken identity. Definitely Google that story to learn more about it. So, Alexandre, on to you.
Hey, hello, Doctor. Hello, Lanre. It's nice to be with you to chat. Streaming live from Trois-Rivières, Quebec. So I'm happy to be with you guys. It's my second time at the festival. I was there 3 years ago with my other short film called Mutant. It was my first short film, and I had a great time in Milwaukee. So got to be back with I'll End Up in Jail. The film is inspired by, I'm still trying to find, what are the stories I want to tell. And the common point between this film and my first one is those blurred moral line that we all shelter, and how flawed we are, but how we do struggle every day to just get better, and keep what's ours, and especially in that film, freedom. And so this very kind of universal story, I wanted to ground it in something I knew, and I knew I wanted to shoot that second film in the region where I grew up, which is a rural region in Quebec. It's like the Texas of Quebec, if you will. It's called La Beauce. So kind of a pretty intense place to grow up, but very interesting as well. So I knew that. I knew the landscape would be something. And I also knew that I wanted my character to be somehow my mother. I wanted a character like that is full of love and compassion, and really kind of inhabiting this mother archetype, and to be confronted with diametrally opposed values or situation. And in this case, it's like a murderous car crash while she's escaping an abusive relationship, and she doesn't want to go back. And she doesn't want to go to the police. And she's with that kind of messed up kid that doesn't want to lose his freedom as well. And both of them decide to team up, to save their soul. Right. But there's some twist and turn in there. So
certainly. And that's why I wanted to talk with both of you about these films, because commonality, I think both of them share, is that there's stories that have characters experiencing the worst possible situations that they can face and trying to make the best possible choice in the face of those kinds of situations. And what I find most interesting about each of your films is how your characters respond to the situation at hand. And so I'm just curious to know, how did each of you come up with developing your characters?
For me, it was really about putting myself in that situation and trying to say to myself, okay, first I know what I would do, but if I chose the wrong thing, what would I do then? And if I kept on choosing the wrong thing, what would I do then? And that just kept on opening idea after idea after idea. And one of the things was, okay, what would happen if I were boxed in, like totally boxed in and had no way out of it? Kind of like this character is boxed in by them having the video.
Right. Yeah. And how does that manifest into the different characters, that you have? Because, each of them are responding to the situation in a different way. One's, you have some of the characters who are trying to capitalize off this, and you have another set of characters where it doesn't seem like there's a good choice that can be made. Right.
And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed about it. And the with the short, you're literally jumping into the middle of the scenario. I mean, obviously the feature sets everything up, and then we ultimately get to that scenario. So some of the you don't see some of the choices that they've made beforehand, which are even more ridiculous and more absurd to try to get out of this. So for me, it was just a lot of fun to write. Just a lot of fun to write people doing ridiculously absurd things to try to get out of a really bad situation.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about that as we continue with the conversation. Alexandre.
Well, that was very interesting. I wish I can. I hope I'll see your film, man. It looks very nice. Well, for me, I wanted to kill the mother figure, like the archetype I told you about.
Right.
because I found out I was thinking about my own mother being into this dire situation and taking care of that junkie kid on the road, and that ultimately is the one who committed the crime, you know. And the only way for her to be free was to kill that kid and sever that mother kind of link, you know, and kill that mother that she was embodying all alone, that she was fleeing at the beginning of the film, but then embodies on the road after the car crash. So and so at the end, Maureen, who's the name of my character, becomes something else, a new creature, you know. So yeah, that was how I was tackling this character in the story.
Yeah, and what's interesting about your description of that is, you know, wanting to kill the mother. Just how closely that ties to the title of your film.
To all end up in jail.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if I understand totally your question.
Well, I guess you know when you say you want to kill the mother, you know, her, you know, seeking liberation. You know, I think you know how we often get locked into these roles, into these personalities, you know, which we find ourselves compromising over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, this jail and is metaphorical, but at the same time in her mindset as well. And you know, there was also this thing like freedom is a state of mind was a thing that came back to me while writing the film. So that's where I wanted to be at the end, you know, with her doing all those tough choices, and maybe they're not the best, you know, but they are her own choices, you know, and she'll have to live with them for after the film, you know, but at least it's hers. So, and interestingly, the title is I took it from the song that plays when she's fleeing in the truck, which is a murder ballad, very lo-fi murder ballad that was sang by a Quebec country singer. And interestingly, the lyrics in that ballad kind of underline what's happening in the story as well. So that's funny.
Certainly. And Alexandre, I just want to stick with you for a moment. So you talk about, you know, when you were talking about what inspired the film, you said it's set in your hometown, and you were talking about the landscape. And I just want you to talk a little bit more about, you know, how you utilize that space in the film in terms of, you know, determining the action and where things are set as the story continues.
Right. Well, I like to describe I'll End Up in Jail like a neo-Western kind of film because of that utilization of the landscape. So basically, those two characters are stuck in some kind of a huis clos in the middle of nowhere, and I wanted to have them like they're little being that don't know what to do in this kind of huge empty space, and at the same time feeling this pressure building up between them two and some people they will encounter on the road, and get into that bubble that will become their secret, you know. So I think like the hilly landscape of the Appalachian that are bordering the La Beauce kind of helped me bring that grandeur, and then going down into the forest where they are hiding the body and getting stuck under the tree was just like kind of getting
Yeah, that was quite something because you know, it gets to a point where is she going to be released from underneath that tree or not?
Yeah. I wondered, you know, I wrote like, I get very crazy when I write script because I don't understand what I write, you know, so I need to write many drafts to understand what's up with all these ideas. And there's 23 versions of that script, and there's some version where she doesn't get out. So you're right about that.
Indeed. Lanre, your film is the majority of it is set within you know, this, you know, like a condo. You know, is that the right way to?
Yeah, it's like a loft.
A loft, yeah. So I'm just curious to know how did you come about ultimately determining how characters were interacting in that space? Because we see them in these fixed positions within that space, and then more and more unfolds. And if you could just talk about how that unravels and how you made those decisions.
Just the movement within the space.
Yes.
So I probably can't show you, but what I do is I make a floor plan of exactly what the space is going to look like. And so I knew probably about 2 weeks before that we were going to shoot in that specific space, and I had already done some pre-visualization work beforehand. And then once we found the space, then I was able to pretty much set, okay, these characters are going to move here, they're going to go over here, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, pretty much on the lines where I wanted them to move as I was making the shot list and as I was making the storyboards and as I was making the floor plan.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I find really compelling about each of your films, just how well constructed they are in terms of how the stories unfold. And in addition to that, each of them have these big reveals. And I'm just curious to know, as you've been going through this virtual festival circuit, what kind of responses have you been getting from audiences?
So far, it's actually been all excellent, which actually is really nice. We've gotten a bunch of reviews too, and they've all been excellent. And I think this is, so far, I haven't seen or heard a bad review yet. So that's been really, really good.
That's awesome.
Great. Yeah, me too. Well, I had the chance to start my run in July 2019 in Guanajuato in Mexico. And after that, we went on a tear in Canada and Quebec and followed the film in Sundance, Clermont-Ferrand, and Tampere as well. And then pandemic hit. So I kind of tasted both sides of the rainbow, so the colorful side and the shitty dark side. And but by both ends, it was awesome. And it was awesome to feel it in the cinemas at first, because people, even if you're in Mexico or you're in France or you're in Finland, those twists and turns, people react the same way, and I started recording them. Like, I'm in Mexico. It's the time where, she's gonna stab him in the neck, and people went on everywhere. So it was funny. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, of course, it's cool to have, even though we're online, to receive some feedback as well. So yeah, just like Lanre, people were kind with the film, and I'm really happy about it.
Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to see it with a big crowd.
I'm sorry for you, man. I hope you will.
Yeah.
I hope you will, man.
So it would have always been nice to see those reactions, just because that there are some turns, and see how they react to the more humorous parts. Like, I've seen it with the most people I've seen it with at one time is maybe 3 or 4, which just isn't the same.
It's not.
No, it's not, man.
Yeah, because the film came out after the pandemic had already happened. So
really hope you'll get your chance, man. And either or, I'm sure you got plenty of friends where you are. So do that one of those block party screening,
Thanks, man.
Yeah, and it quite doesn't. You also, really can't create a theater space where, how, like, with the with the professional sports games that's been taking place, people have virtually appeared in the stands or whatnot. I don't think that works the same way when we're film viewing. So this is what we have. A question I've been asking filmmakers in these conversations I've been having is, just the way you build trust with documentary filmmakers, people that they focus on, and then also with filmmakers making fictional films, building trust with the actors on putting their vision forward. how did each of you build trust with your actors to bring forth the vision that you each do in your films?
That's a great question.
Yeah, really.
Right. I think when people know ultimately that you have their back, and it's not about you, but it's about them, and they feel safe with you, so you're not trying to manipulate them, or you're not trying to do anything with some ulterior motive, then people are going to start to trust you. I mean, I think we've all been in a situation where somebody's called us, or somebody's like started talking to us and asking us for something, and you're saying in the back of your head, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And then they finally make the ask, and you're like, aha, right? Because they're not being direct. And I think when you're really direct, you're upfront with people, and they feel safe with you, and they know that they are going to get a truthful answer from you. I think that just builds trust within the relationship, and they'll be willing to go the extra mile for you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's such a great question, Doc. Like after my first short film, like all I was looking for was this approval from my crew that, you know, I did a job, you know, I did a job that I was good for them. They were happy working with me. They enjoyed the experience, and that's what I received. And after that was like, okay, I got the go to do another film, you know? So, and on this new adventure, I realized that when you act, like as Lanre said, when you're direct with people, when you're truthful, they give you their trust. And then you experience something on set that is very close to some kind of religious experience. And that's how I felt it. And I say that because you're a bunch of like 30 person on set, from the gaffer to your lead actress, and we're all working on something that is not existing, and we're talking about that thing that is not existing, but we're putting it into being, you know, in the next second. And it's an act of pure, it's magic, it's heart driven, it's soul driven, it's wishing, it's crazy. And those conversation about this abstract thing of that film this scene you're about to shoot, this is wild. This is for me, that's what I love the most about all of this cinema thing is that, for sure.
Indeed. Those are some awesome responses from each of you. Thank you. And I'm glad to see that both of you are in your respective spaces safe and healthy. And it's, you know, when we're dealing with a time of such wild uncertainty, you know, I'm kind of, you know, have some trepidation asking you, you know, what projects are you working on? I guess I can ask a two-part question. One, if you are working on any new projects, and then two, you know, how has being in this situation that the pandemic has produced, how would you say it's affected your creativity?
So for part one was what are we working on in the future, right?
Right.
So for me, would love to get the feature film going for a storybook ending, but obviously that's going to happen once the pandemic is over and all that good stuff. And I've also been writing writing a pilot with my wife and a friend of mine, and that's about a Black couple living in Brooklyn, and their interesting and absurd adventures dealing with the infertility and the pregnancy industrial complex. And the thing about it in terms of my creativity and in the pandemic is I've found that in a weird way, it's made me more relaxed, because I think a lot of filmmakers are like, okay, I got to do something. What am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? You know, you have that need or that urge to always be working on something. And of course, we're always, when we're not filming, we're going to be writing. But for me, since it's like, well, I'm not going to be filming anything right now, so I'm not even going to worry about it. So that part that's always running in the back of my head has kind of calmed down tremendously. Because I know, it's like, okay, once everything opens up, then it'll probably ramp back up. But for now, it's like, boom, it's quiet.
You're a wise man. Well, I've since pandemic, I've been working on a first feature film. So I'm writing that at the moment, and also I'm a poet. I write some poetry, and there's a new poetry book coming next spring. So I got this out, and when I was shooting, I'll end up in jail. The first day was so catastrophic, man. It was crazy. We're supposed to shoot 11 shot, and we shot 4, and I went to bed that night because it was a autumn film, and 3 days before we start shooting, it became a winter film because 3 feet of snow fell on the ground, and it was -26. So that's why. And I was in bed that first night, and I was like, why the hell am I not writing novel? So that's another plan I got. I had this idea that was supposed to be a series, and I was like, nobody's gonna finance that. So I found a publisher here in Quebec, and they greenlit me, and they helped me. They helped me a bit to support my writing. So that's in the tube as well.
Got it. So. Thank you for making these films, and thank you for having them in the festival. And most importantly, it's glad that you're even virtually that you're back, with the Milwaukee Film Festival once again. Lanre, the last project we showed of yours was Somewhere in the Middle, which, quite frankly, people still talk about. So, and I hope they, keep talking about this one. Alexandre, thanks for joining us. From Quebec. It's been great watching both of your films. It's also been great talking with both of you about your films. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
you for having me. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Indeed. And be safe and healthy where you are. And I also want to share that to the filmmakers, who talked with Kara earlier tonight. Thank you all for taking part in these conversations, and more so, thank you for having your films in our festival. We greatly appreciate it. So that concludes the Nightcap for the end of the festival eve, also known as Day 14. Thank you for supporting the Milwaukee Film Festival this year. Thank you for supporting Milwaukee Film. Stay safe, stay healthy, and until the end of tomorrow, we'll see you at the movies. Take care.